Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannon O'Hara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final Talk to the Entities specialty podcast episode. If you are just tuning into this and you are interested in entity consciousness, I have been going over the last 12 months with a different focus on a different Talk to the Entities specialty. And today will be the final one on demons. Now, this is a topic that I am quite nervous to talk about publicly. I haven't done so, and it is not something that I think is a particularly easy public conversation, simply due to, number one, demons, but number two, also the significance that people go into around this. But I wanted to give it a go and see if I could create some more awareness, share some cool tools, information, and any kind of empowerment for a lighter, brighter, easier possibility for any of you that are interested. So demons fall under the entity umbrella, obviously, and there is a lot of reference to demons in a lot of our societies, but at this point in this day and age, I'll speak for the majority of people, think that they're speaking of metaphorical demons. And I'd like to indicate that when someone talks about, like, well, they really have demons, or they're really fighting with their demons, or they're talking about actual demons. So what makes a demon different than another kind of entity that we talk about? And just a quick overview, entity is the broad category. And then within the broad category, you have all sorts of different types of what we would call entities or spirits or beings, just as diverse as the micro elements of nature and biology. There are just as many variations and deviations of entities or spirits, if you can imagine that. So demons refers to a kind of spirit that most of us could agree that is usually having a negative impact. The word demon in English was, I believe, originated in Greek and then was Latinized by Plato or somebody that we know, and he used it to talk about the spirits of dead warriors. And I'm not really sure where the word demon started to become a reference to entities who have a negative impact. But every culture has mythology, information, and also a lot of iconography, a lot of art depicting demons. Obviously, India, Indonesia, all of Asia has a lot of iconography and imagery depicting demons. And in the Western world, if anybody wants to see an artist who I believe did a really good job of representing or showing the demon universe, you could look at Gaudi, who was a Spanish painter during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. And he did a lot. He brought through a lot of interesting imagery that is dark and heavy, and I believe quite accurate and quite interesting that artists can show the rest of us something that the rest of us might only sense. So, if we start from the place of that demons do exist. Now, as soon as I say that, how much significance, hysteria, upset, polarity, conflict comes up? And this is one of the ways in which demons can control us, is by getting us to go into reaction. And not every negative thing that happens in our life is demons, and not every negative and heavy thing that we experience in the world and in society is demons at all. But when it is demons, it is demons. That makes sense? So I was an entity sensitive child. I'm an entity sensitive and aware adult. And I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up around a lot of drug addicts and alcoholics who were my brothers and my biological father. So I was surrounded by a lot of that vibe. And when there tends to be a huge amount of substance abuse, drugs and alcohol, you could be quite certain there's some demons there. And as a child, I didn't have any way of dealing with it or handling it. And so it became a place of, I was just in a lot of reaction. Fast forward to being a young adult and getting more conscious, using the tools of access consciousness, and starting to develop my path of entity awareness and also the tools of talk to the entities. I had an experience of attending a very powerful and profound life transforming class with Dr. Dean here in Ireland. And this was, I don't know when. It was quite some years ago, probably more than 15. And I went home that night by myself, and I was staying by myself, and I got home and I wasn't tired, so I decided to watch a movie on my computer. And I, throughout the duration of that movie, started just feeling worse and worse and worse about myself. So it wasn't physically worse, it was psychologically worse. I started to get really just this feeling of being so wrong, incredible judgment of myself, and this very familiar sort of emotional, psychological, I would call paranoia is the closest I can put it. And it got worse and worse and worse. And I could, at the same time, sense this being outside the window of my apartment. And it would go from the window to outside the bedroom door, back to the window and outside the bedroom door. And I just deteriorated and just got more emotionally worse and worse and worse until eventually I thought I heard in my head, ask for help. And I said, I need help. And the being, quote unquote, walked in the room. And to me, it looked like the most beautiful man thing that I could experience. It actually looked a lot like, if you have ever seen the movie Rise of the Guardians, that I think it's made by Pixar. No, I think it's DreamWorks, Rise of the Guardians. If you haven't seen it, it's such a cool movie. I highly recommend, one of my faves. But there is a character in there, Pitch Black. He's supposed to be the boogeyman. And this being that came in the room with me looked a lot like that. So it came in the room and it sat down on the bed next to me, and it put its hand on my stomach. And immediately I saw my body as being mutilated in this weird box, and I fell asleep. And I woke up the next morning and I was a mess. I felt hungover after not drinking any alcohol, totally psychologically unstable, just totally flipped out, incapable, didn't want to go out, didn't want to see people, social paranoia. And I forced myself to get dressed. And there was another access class happening at the time with my dad. And so I forced myself to get dressed and went to class just feeling just the worst. And I said to him, hey, look, I need some help. I'm really struggling with something. And I didn't really know what it was or how to handle it. And so we went to lunch that day and I told him what happened. He said, oh, that was a demon. And I thought, why have you never told me? How has this never come up before? And obviously it was just the time that I was ready for that conversation. So that was my first introduction to the fact and the reality of not really the fact of demons, because I had been aware of demons without identifying that they were demons for all of my life. And it was the first time as an adult that I had an interaction with a demon that I could identify and recognize its impact. So it actually took me quite some months after that to really work through that. And what happens with demons is they essentially gaslight. They're the greatest gaslighters in the universe. They essentially manipulate you into believing that you're powerless and that without them, you are unloved and they love you more than anybody else. And without them, you have no power and you really need them. And like they keep you safe. But it's like all these lies. It's just think about like the most gaslighting codependent relationship. And they really are good at manipulating us based on our own judgments of self. And judgment is really the key in this conversation, because if you don't judge, you can't be controlled or affected or impacted by demons. And now an advertisement sponsored by Consciousness. Have you heard of the Access.me app? The Access.me app is 25 plus years of Access consciousness classes. Now, if that excites you or overwhelms you, let me tell you that some of the most life-changing, epically, no words to describe the profound transformation of my life and the accessing of infinite possibility I have gained through the classes that you'll find in the Access Me app. If you were to purchase each one of these classes individually, you would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you were to attend each of these Access Consciousness classes, you would need to have been going to classes for 25 plus years, like me. But now, Access.me costs only $275 a month. So you're essentially renting these incredibly profound, priceless, literally invaluable classes that will access consciousness, transform your universe, and essentially educate you in areas that too often we really don't receive a good education. Like, how do we have easy, honoring, intimate, profound relationships with ourselves, with others? What would it take for magic to actually be what we turned to for having more money, for having more health? What would it take to not feel like all of your wishes and dreams for consciousness and lightness and being happy to not just be a stupid pipe dream that are never going to happen because what's honored here is density and intensity? Sure. And what do you know? Access.me is a treasure trove of possibility that you can subscribe to on a monthly basis to access more consciousness. How does it get any easier than that? Check it out, access.me online, and see you in the fields of consciousness. So it took me, I would say, probably 3 months. And this demon thing, like, I was terrified by this demon. It was, to think back on it, it's kind of funny to me, because now, since I've gone through the change and I've learned how to work with those kinds of entities, and I have claimed and owned my own capacities and powers, it seems like a non-reality that I ever could have been so scared by a demon. But at the time, I really was. And I was able to like push it far enough away that it was sort of like on the periphery of my consciousness. But anytime I would think about it or turn towards it at all, I would start being terrified again. So basically, I was working through this with the tools of consciousness. So I'd be in the question, okay, so what's it going to take for me to change this? What do I need to claim, own, and acknowledge? And one day, I was just sitting there and I was like, okay, so this spirit's really freaking me out. Why do I think it has more power than me? Why do I give it this place where it has all of this control over how I feel? And I realized in that moment that the only reason that that demon had that kind of control or power or impact over me was because I was not willing to be something. I wasn't willing to be greater than that demon, for sure, number one, but I also wasn't willing to be powerful. And in that moment, at that time, it just clicked for me. And I was like, whoa. And I reconstituted a level of power, I'll call it. Power, I think, is a tricky word because it can be weaponized into all sorts of weird, creepy things. And sometimes we think power means doing harm or harming people, because we do see power do great harm. And power also can be tremendously generative and healing. It's just a tool, and it depends on the hand that holds the tool. So I claimed and owned my potency, essentially, in a way that gave me so much more choice and capability. And the demon just became irrelevant. And I know that that might sound silly or too good to be true, or sometimes I don't feel like the words really convey the magnitude of some of these things that we experience, these profound changes in our internal landscape. But for any of you guys that know, you know. It's like when you claim and own a level of awareness or power, or stop buying a lie and look at what is and what's true for you. When you get more of your own awareness, more of yourself, it has incredible ramifications. So essentially the demon just left. It was bizarre. It was like I didn't really have to work much past that. I just had to claim and own my impotency. And I realized that there's this quote in the Bible, the Lord shall never give me more than I can bear. And I realized that that demon was actually gifting me the capacity of, it was what made me step up into greater power. I'm not sure that anything else really would have, because I really didn't have to. But when you're terrified of a spirit who's totally haunting you, you got to do something. So it really inspired me and pushed me to claim and own my power. I don't think that was its intention, but that's what I turned that situation into. And since then, I have been able to deal with demons in a much cleaner way. So we have a whole process for, it's not even really that complicated dealing with demons and talk to the entities. It's, I don't think it's unique actually to access consciousness and talk to the entities, because I've actually heard the demon clearing in Lord of the Rings. So one of the Tolkien books, the Queen Elf, I can't remember her name. Sorry, I should be great if I knew this better. But she essentially banishes a demon, and she uses the demon clearing that we use, which is like return from whence you came, never to return. That is the demon clearing, return from whence you came, never to return. And so that's the demon clearing. And in fact, it is that simple. However, there are some things that you need to have. There's some information that makes dealing with demons a lot easier, one of which is what I stated earlier about that it's judgment that gives demons power. So I think also I would like to talk about why demons, why do they exist? Why are they here? Why isn't a great question, because you can go around in circles infinitely with that. Demons, from my perspective, and this is from my perspective and the way I deal with it, is that demons have jobs, and they're actually slave entities. Their job is to maintain unconsciousness and anti-consciousness. So that's what they're doing. That's what they're here for. And if you align and agree with unconsciousness and anti-consciousness, if you choose unconsciousness and anti-consciousness, which essentially judging yourself is anti-consciousness, you're anti-you, you're anti-inclusion of everything. If you judge you, that's a form of anti-consciousness and unconsciousness. That's just one form. But there's lots of forms of anti-consciousness and unconsciousness, like substance abuse, like I before mentioned. And there's lots of other, anti-consciousness is when you choose to go against consciousness, and unconsciousness is not accessing consciousness. And so their demon's jobs is to make sure that that persists. And if you look at the world, it's could the wars, the devastation, the cruelty, the destruction persist if there was more consciousness? So what do I mean by consciousness? The definition of consciousness and access consciousness, the way that my dad, Gary, just defines it, as that consciousness includes everything. And here's the key: judges nothing. So if that's consciousness, the inclusion of everything, oneness, and judges nothing. Wow. So judgment really becomes how we either create greater or destroy. And do you judge you? When you judge you, what do you give power over you? So this is what I really love about consciousness and what I really love about empowerment is that we're no longer, and for the purposes of this conversation, we're no longer fighting a foe outside of us, i.e. a demon or a mean person. Just think of demons as like the meanest person ever. We're no longer fighting a foe outside of you. You're choosing, you're addressing the power within you. And you're either going to be an enemy to yourself by judging you, or you're going to be an ally to yourself by not judging, by being an allowance of self, by caring more for you, by recognizing that judging you does not accomplish any kind of transformation or change, and that judgment is false. It's not real and it's fabricated. Judgment is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. We are not born knowing how to judge. You were taught to judge. And then society just reinforces that lie by everybody agreeing that judgment has some sort of levity or has some sort of truth, which it doesn't. Judgment is 100% fabricated. What isn't 100% fabricated? Infinite energy. That's energy that, like the energy from the sun, for example, or the infinite energy of consciousness exists whether you believe in it or not. Judgment, if you stop choosing it, if you stop believing it, if you stop functioning from it, it goes away because it has to be manufactured. So judgment is a really huge key about how we either destroy ourselves or we access an infinite universe of gifting, receiving, generosity, infinite energy, transformation, ask and I shall receive, possibility, magic, miracles, etc., etc., etc. And the demon source universe is not magic and miracles. Obviously, the demon source universe is full of heavy disease, lack, deficiency, torture, i.e., not fun. And this is a choice that we can make. And this is a choice that we all do make, whether to buy into the lies of judgment and therefore get a ticket into the demon source universes, or to choose not to judge, to choose the path of gratitude, allowance, kindness. And I'm not talking about like airy fairy, peace, love, and brown rice. Like, I don't mean that path of allowance, because even a lot of people who do peace, love, and brown rice, or let's like, love your neighbor or whatever, that can be a thin veneer over a sea of judgment. I'm really talking about no judgment. And not even as a no judgment for others. Like, it's not even about like, that comes later. It's no judgment for you. Like, how many times have you judged yourself today? And is reconditioning the way that you function, because if you're listening to this as an adult, you've already hardwired a lot of ways of thinking and behavior into existence. We're neurologically, we're always trying to like pair off as much like excess energy as possible so that energy can move efficiently and you're not like using a lot of energy. So we hardwire essentially reality, quote unquote, literally into our brains starting from day one of our lives. And by the time we're adults, usually that hardwiring is not as easy to change and is not as malleable as when we're kids. So most of you listening to this are probably adults, and getting to change a way that you think, i.e. judging, will take some persistence, consistency, and retraining. And is it worth it? Are you willing? Is your lighter, brighter, easier, freer life worth making the effort to monitor the way that you think and choose to not judge, even when you so desperately want to believe in the judgment? And that's really powerful, to be able to just stop judging, and especially to stop judging you. And I'm not expecting, and just side note, like, this could take years. It's taken me years and years and years, and I still find myself going into judgment of me. But then here's another piece of that. A lot of times when I'm in judgment, when I think I'm in judgment of me or in judgment of somebody else, I'm actually perceiving somebody else's judgments and interpreting it as my reality. So this is where awareness becomes, you have to include the conversation about awareness, because you are aware of other people's judgments. Have you ever acknowledged that? So that's a huge part of the demon sourced universe, is judgment. And I assert that if you were willing to not judge, you would neutralize all demons. So that's for those of you guys that want that choice. And there are a lot of people in the world who don't want to get rid of demons. And I was sort of shocked to discover that. I have two brothers who have both had decades of substance abuse. And I was talking to one of my brothers once, and I was trying to talk to him about like what he was doing to himself, and like, how much I loved him. And I really saw how he was like hurting himself. Like, that's an understatement, hurting himself, but like really destroying himself. And I said, but it's like, you've got all these demons that you're listening to. Like, why don't we clear the demons, And he goes, I love my demons. And he said it just like that. I love my demons. And it was like, it had never occurred to me that would be somebody's choice and that they would stick to it. And he stuck to it. And I had to really be an allowance that was his choice and not my choice for him. And that if I'm not judging his choice, then that's not wrong that he wants that. He can choose that. It's not my place to determine what he should choose, because I'm not the God of his world. I can only be the God of my own universe. And people should make all sorts of choices, and none of them need to be our responsibility. And I think that this is a really big key for any of you guys who are healers and would love for the world to be a lighter, brighter place, for people to be happier, for there to be more peace, kindness, joy, free-flowing sexual energy that wasn't about rape and violence and perversion and abuse of others. It's like, the world can be heaven and the world can be hell. And if you would like to live in heaven, that passport and the key to that is through your choices, i.e. judgment, plus a whole bunch of other things like gratitude and receiving and being. And if you want to live in hell, it's pretty easy to go there through judgment and control and drugs and excessive alcohol and believing lies, essentially. And the whole thing with demons is that they get you to believe, they really try to get you to believe the lie that you don't have power, that no one loves you, that they care more about you than anybody else. Just trying to think of some other popular demon lies that I've heard. Mine was the whole thing that they love me more than anyone else. And I realized at one point that was not love, that that was a really, really bad relationship. I was losing myself. But I know there's another one where people, like, demons promise you power. Like, well, I'll help you have this power that you don't already possess yourself. And I think there's probably some other ones, but those are like, I would say, very, very common ones. Like they're not hugely creative. They're just repeating the same program and we buy it, So do you need to keep buying it? And what have you made real and true that isn't? And if you could return, and if you would return all demons from whence they came, never to return to you, your body, or this reality ever again, would you like to? And return them all from whence they came, never to return to you, your body, or this reality ever again. Return them all from whence they came, never to return to you, your body, or this reality ever again. And if you can tell, like, as soon as you start clearing demons, you start hearing like, oh, but don't, I love you. Like, you'll be nothing without me. Those are the lies. Return them all from whence they came, never to return to you, your body, or this reality ever again. Let them go, let them go, let them go. And then if you do desire to create with beings who will be generous and benevolent and generative in their contribution, turn towards the light. Light beings have so much more energy, so much more capacity. There is not a lot of energy in unconsciousness and anti-consciousness. All of the energy is in consciousness. And it is up to you to claim and own what you know. Don't believe me. Don't trust me. Trust you. Claim and own what you know. What do you know? Love you guys. Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on shannon-o'hara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.